morning. It's April 17th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with Seoul and Washington joint air exercises kicking off today. South Korea and the United States are staging large-scale regular joint air drills in the South Korean city of Gwangju. The 12 days of training will involve over 100 warplanes and aircraft, with around 1,400 personnel mobilized. Korea-Japan security policy consultation will take place here in Seoul today for the first time in 5 years. The director-level talks are a follow-up measure from the Kishida summit last month. A Sweet 16 birthday party turned into a disaster in Alabama over the weekend, with a shooting that left 4 people dead and dozens injured. Our top story this morning, as tensions remain high here on the Korean peninsula, Seoul and Washington allies are heading into their largest joint air drills. The South Korean Air Force from Monday is holding large-scale joint drills with the U.S. military at Gwangju Air Base. The exercises, codenamed Korea Flying Training, will run until next Friday, featuring about 110 aircraft in total. That includes about 60 fighter jets, such as the F-35A, F-15K, and KF-16, as well as tanker planes from South Korea. The U.S. is contributing approximately 40 aircraft, including the F-35B and F-A-18. This exercise is a continuation with the new name of the annual Max Thunder Air Drills that started in 2009. There will also be 1,400 soldiers deployed. South Korea and Japan will hold director-level talks on diplomacy and security in Seoul on Monday for the first time in 5 years, as a follow-up measure to the Kishida summit last month. The 12th Korea-Japan Security Policy Consultation will be held at the Foreign Ministry in Jong-un in central Seoul, with 2 officials from each side. Monday's meeting comes as leaders of South Korea and Japan agreed to bolster diplomacy and defense amid intensifying threats from North Korea. During today's talks, the 2 sides are expected to discuss cooperation in related fields, while also coming up with countermeasures against North Korean provocations. Over in Japan, the G7 ministers meeting in Sapporo ended with a statement that failed to welcome Tokyo's plan to release contaminated Fukushima water. Our Choi Soo-hyung tells us more.
The G7 meeting of climate, energy and environment ministers from 7 major countries was held in Sapporo City, Japan over the weekend and ended with the adoption of a joint statement. The statement welcomed the scientific dismantling of the Fukushima nuclear power plant, which is being conducted in cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and recognized Japan's transparent efforts. Regarding the discharge of contaminated water from Fukushima nuclear power plant into the sea, the statement also expressed support for the safety verification of the IAEA. However, according to Japan's Asahi Shimbun, the phrase welcomed the release of contaminated water that the Japanese government wanted was not included in the statement. This is due to opposition from Germany's environment minister. The South Korean government reconfirmed its position on the contaminated water in response to the G7 meeting statement. It stated that the process should be scientifically and objectively safe and comply with international standards, and that all aspects of the disposal, including information sharing, should be conducted transparently. Japan plans to release contaminated water from Fukushima nuclear power plant into the sea by this summer. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
A North Korean patrol ship crossed over the de facto border in waters west of the Korean peninsula on Saturday. The South Korean Navy fired warning shots. The North Korean ship appeared to be pursuing Chinese fishing boats in the area. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-sung reports.
A ship from the South Korean Navy fired near a dozen warning shots after a North Korean patrol boat crossed over the de facto border in the waters west of the peninsula on Saturday morning. The ship from the north crossed over the maritime border, dubbed the Northern Limit Line, or NLL, and sailed for almost 2 kilometers into the South's waters. The ship stayed south of the line for about 10 minutes before retreating. The Joint Chiefs of Staff said Sunday that they're not sure as to why, but they see it as unlikely to be an intentional provocation from the north. The ship could have been chasing down some Chinese fishing boats, they said, judging by how it was tailing some Chinese ships as it zigzagged through the sea. The South Korean Navy fired warning shots only when the North Korean ship remained unresponsive to multiple communication attempts. The military also said that the South Korean ship crashed into a Chinese boat during the incident, causing several injuries. 3 South Korean sailors are currently in hospital, with one getting treated for what's reported to be a collarbone injury. The JCS said there was poor visibility at the time, with sailors only being able to see about 90 meters ahead. The day of this latest event also happens to be the birthday of the regime's late founder, Kim Il-sung, and it's North Korea's biggest national holiday. The North had also crossed the northern limit line 6 months ago. However, that crossing was seen as clearly intentional. It also came closer to the brink of a heated clash, with warning shots fired from both the North and the South. Some experts worry that North Korea is going to use this latest incident as pretext to once again bring up their discontent over the NLL, which they have never recognized as a fair border. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
We're into the second week of getting no response on hotlines connected to North Korea. On top of the silence, leader Kim Jong-un appears to have skipped a visit to the commemorative mausoleum, the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun, to mark his late grandfather's birthday. For more on this, let's turn to Professor Brian Myers from Dongsa University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Good morning. First off, like I said, Kim Jong-un doesn't appear to have visited the mausoleum built to commemorate Kim Il-sung on his late grandfather's birthday over the weekend. Professor, why is that?
Well, he didn't visit the mausoleum 3 years ago either, and it's the 111th anniversary of Kim Il-sung's death, I believe, so it's not a particularly round number. It's not a particularly important anniversary. The outside world, I think, tends to look at any change in North Korea's routine as a sign of instability or maybe the leader's poor health. But my impression from reading North Korean speeches over the past few years is that Kim Il-sung's importance to the political culture as a whole has been receding. And I see that as a reflection of a certain confidence on the part of his grandson. His regime has been performing very well by its own military first standards, if not by our standards of economic growth, let alone human rights. So Kim Jong-un may well feel that he doesn't need to rely on his grandfather's myth to quite the extent that he used to. And finally, this is the age of drones and drone attacks. So it makes good security sense for Kim Jong-un, just as it does for America's adversaries in the Middle East and everywhere else, not to be completely predictable about his whereabouts on any given day.
I see. Also, we cannot now talk about the missile launch that took place last week. What's behind North Korea's decision to resume missile activities on top of cutting the inter-Korean hotlines? Is there a particular reason?
Well, I think the main motivation for this latest missile launch was a technological one. Namely, the North wanted to test launch a solid fuel ICBM after years of testing short-range ballistic missiles. Each step in the North's nuclear program naturally leads to the next step up. And that technological progress follows its own timetable. And I think just as much attention is given to things like weather conditions as to dates in the calendar. At the same time, of course, every successful test sends propaganda messages in different directions. For the North Korean people themselves, it's another demonstration of the great success of the military first policy. For the South Koreans, and this, I think, is also where cutting the hotlines comes in, it's intended to show that North Korean provocations will always increase when a conservative government is in power here. And finally, perhaps most importantly, it's meant to show the Americans once again that they cannot hope to slow down the North's nuclear progress through sanctions.
Right. Now that you've just mentioned the North's latest ICBM dubbed the Hwasang-18, let's talk about the latest ICBM. What do we know about this ICBM and what makes it more advanced from previous ones?
Well, its predecessor was the the liquid-fueled Hwasong 17. The regime last tested that in March. It's supposed to have an operational range of about 15,000 kilometers, which is far enough to reach the United States. Now, we're not all that sure about the range of this Hwasong 18 yet, but the most important difference is that it's solid-fueled, which means that instead of having to be fueled in plain sight very slowly before a launch, which would give the Americans a kind of advance notice, the Hwasong 18 can be more or less suddenly wheeled out of nowhere with a full tank, as it were, and then fired so quickly that the enemy doesn't have enough time to respond or to launch a preemptive strike. So this kind of missile poses a much greater threat to the United States than the conventional liquid-fueled type of ICBM like the Hwasong 17. Now, the South Koreans have been trying to downplay this latest news, saying it was just a mid-range test. We don't know how far it can go. And we know from those leaked American documents that have been in the news for the past few days that the White House believes Pyongyang is, quote unquote, overselling its nuclear capability. But I think most Western nuclear experts agree that it would be very foolhardy of the United States not to proceed from the assumption that the North now has a solid-fueled ICBM capability.
I see. Before we let you go, Professor Myers, let's go back to the now cut off inter-Korea hotlines. Some experts say the lines will not be restored anytime soon. Are you on the same page? I mean, when do you think the lines will be back up and running again?
Yeah, I think the hotlines are unlikely to be restored during President Yoon's term because the North wants the South Korean electorate to believe that inter-Korean relations are always going to get worse when the conservatives are in power here. I think if South Korea were to cancel military exercises or make some other concession, the North might restore the hotlines for a while. But, I think too much fuss is made about these hotlines. The truth of the matter is that inter-Korean communication has never depended on these hotlines. The two states have historically conducted most of their communication through other more discreet channels. And we also need to understand that even when the hotlines are allegedly operational, the North routinely refuses to accept calls from South Korea. That happened during the Moon administration as well. So I think the main function of these hotlines is as a low-risk way for Pyongyang to signal its satisfaction or dissatisfaction with whatever is going on down here. And I expect the two states will continue communicating under the water, as Koreans say, or behind the scenes if they have something important to discuss. But these symbolic hotlines will probably not be reconnected until the South makes some sort of concession to the North.
I see. They are pretty symbolic and they haven't done any harm yet so far, so let's keep a close eye on it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Professor Myers. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Sure thing.
Four people were killed and over a dozen others injured during a deadly shooting at a birthday party in Alabama on Saturday. Among the dead is the brother of the girl celebrating her sweet 16. Our Yi Seung-ja has more.
What was supposed to be a joyous Sweet 16 birthday party in Alabama on Saturday turned into a deadly event with 4 people shot dead and over 24 others injured.
This incident occurred at approximately 10:34 p.m. near the 200 block on Broad Neck Street here in Dadeville in Tallapoosa County. All right. There were 4 lives, not fatalities, lives. There were 4 lives tragically lost in this incident, and there's been a multitude of injuries. As they said, this is going to be a long, complicated process.
The Alabama Law Enforcement Agency said that due to the seriousness of the incident, the FBI, the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and the 5th Circuit District Attorney's Office were all present at the crime scene and are currently assisting with the investigation into the shooting. Among those killed is the brother of the girl celebrating her 16th birthday. Many of those wounded are also teenagers, including several who are currently in critical condition. Authorities did not provide any information on a potential suspect or any possible motive for the shooting. The latest deadly shooting in the U.S. comes just weeks after two high-profile shootings that occurred in the nearby states of Tennessee and Kentucky. There have been at least 146 mass shootings in the U.S. so far in 2023. The rise in the number of mass shootings in the country has prompted more leaders to call for tougher gun control laws. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, South Korea saw a record number of working senior citizens last year amid a rapidly aging society. According to government data on Monday, the number of employed people in their 60s and above reached 5.6 million in 2022. Now, this marks the first time that the age group added more than 400,000 workers in a year since 1963. The number of self-employed among this age has also jumped by a staggering 70% over the course of 6 years. With this, the age group for the first time accounted for 20% of all employed people. The latest data shows that the trend continues into this year and is largely due to those in their 60s and older, now taking up a quarter of the country's entire population. South Korea's mission to be carbon neutral by 2050 continues and in fact is more active than ever. One ongoing project is renovating old buildings to make them more eco-friendly. Our Shin Ha-young has this report.
In order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, South Korea must reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings, which accounted for 1/4 of the country's total emissions, by 32.8% compared to 2018 figures by 2030. But this is not an easy task, as many older buildings weren't built to current standards that take emissions into account. With these older buildings in mind, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport launched a project to support those who plan to participate in green remodeling, which aims to improve the environment indoors while reducing greenhouse gas emissions from buildings.
This was a police station for 40 years, and after undergoing green remodeling, it's now an energy-efficient office building with its energy cost 65% lower compared to before.
Installing solar panels helped transform this office into a more eco-friendly place. In particular, the building integrated photovoltaic or BIPV system on the exterior walls not only saves energy, but also enhances the appearance of the structure. It also has a building energy management system to monitor and control the building's energy needs. This daycare center is a much cozier place for children during the winter since going green. An energy-efficient thermal pane window using low emissivity glass allows sunlight in during winter and keeps heat inside. In summer, the windows block out heat while still letting in natural light.
We used to consume around 14,000 kilowatt-hour of electricity per month, but after going green, it went down by 2,000. This place was freezing during the winter, but now it's so cozy and warm that even the kids can run around barefoot.
This eco-friendly university library improved its energy efficiency by 50% compared to before. It uses a heat recovery ventilator to improve indoor air quality by replacing stale indoor air with fresh air from outside. Starting this year, the green remodeling project for public buildings has expanded to senior centers and public libraries. As for the private sector, the government decided to provide more financial aid to participants.
About 12,000 private buildings undergo green remodeling annually. But last year, due to the rate hikes, there were fewer participants. So this year, the government is focusing more on private buildings.
He added that green remodeling has become more attractive these days as energy bills rise. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Japan, where a suspect has been charged for throwing a smoke bomb at Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The suspect, a 24-year-old man from Kawanishi City, was charged on Sunday, local time, and this with forcible obstruction of business, a sentence that carries a jail term of up to 3 years and a fine equivalent to $3,700 US. Now, he was arrested after reportedly throwing a homemade smoke bomb at the PM during a campaign event on Saturday at a fishing port in western Japan. Kishida was removed from the scene unharmed before the device went off. Authorities are determining whether the device was meant to be lethal. The incident drew immediate comparisons to the assassination of former PM Shinzo Abe last year. He was killed by a gunman using a homemade firearm. Now, Germany has shut down its last 3 remaining nuclear power plants. Power stations Isar 2, Emsland and Neckar-Westheim 2 had their plugs pulled on Saturday at midnight. The move is in response to years of anti-nuclear protests prompted by nuclear-related disasters, such as those in Fukushima and Chernobyl. It's also in line with Germany's ambitions to generate all of its electricity using renewable methods by 2035. But some are skeptical of the move, claiming it will have negative economic impacts. Germany's neighbors, meanwhile, have moved in the opposite direction, with Finland opening Europe's most powerful nuclear reactor on Sunday. It comes amid energy supply concerns due to Russia's war in Ukraine. Now, fighting has been halted in Sudan after rival military factions agreed to a temporary ceasefire to allow people wounded in 2 days of heavy clashes to be evacuated. It comes after a weekend of violence between rival troops from the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces. The clashes broke out on Saturday local time across multiple locations. Troops fought for control of Sudan's presidential palace, its state TV and army headquarters. At least 56 people were killed, including 3 workers from the World Food Programme. The violence comes on the back of a proposal that would transition the country's military government to civilian rule and would see the RSF integrate with the Sudanese army. The country has been run by a council of generals since a coup in October 2021. And finally, an extreme athlete has emerged from a cave outside Spain's southern city of Granada after spending 500 days there in isolation. Spanish mountaineer Beatriz Flamini saw sunlight for the first time on Friday since entering the underground cave on November 20th in 2021. The goal was to break the world record for the longest time spent in a cave in a project called Time Cave. The record is still being confirmed. The challenge was monitored by scientists looking into the effect this would have on the mind, as well as human circadian rhythms. She was supported by a team that dropped off food and supplies at an exchange point within the cave. During her time in isolation, she missed major world events, including the outbreak of the war in Ukraine and the death of Queen Elizabeth II.
Good morning. The up and down temperature trend continues, which is common this time of year. And after a chilly start this morning, a warm afternoon will take shape across Korea. Yellow dust engulfed most of Korea yesterday, and there's still some lingering dust in the capital area in Chungcheongdo provinces, but expect to have bad air quality during the first half of the day. And those of you in the south already have improved air quality under plenty of sunshine, while the central regions will see sunshine replaced by clouds as the day goes on today. A pleasant afternoon is in store with breathable air and nicely warmed up temperatures. Then rain clouds will form tonight. Rain that's starting from northern parts of the country will gradually spread nationwide overnight. And Chungcheong, Namdo, and Jeollabuk-do provinces could see up to 50 millimeters of rainfall. Seoul and the rest of the inland areas will see 5 to 30 millimeters. Rain continues into Wednesday in southern provinces, while the capital will see highs soaring to 27 degrees Celsius on the same day. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is all we have for today's New Day at Arirang. Thanks for watching.
I'm live! 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지. 텐션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.
Hello, my name is Andrew Chernesky. I'm the ambassador of the Republic of Belarus in the Republic of Korea. Arirang is a Korean national song which goes deep into centuries, helping for the future generation to understand better the rich history and culture of the Republic of Korea. Today, we have met an opportunity to understand better the Belarusian culture. And we found that there are some things which is common between Belarus and Korea culture, even in spite of remoteness of the countries. And I think in our very complicated world, it's very important to find provisions for making bridges between countries. And I think that studying culture and history of countries helps us to better understand each other, resonating with the word Arirang.
We are the original. It all began with us. Hashtag K-pop global, hashtag communication, hashtag entertainment, hashtag variety, hashtag idol essentials, hashtag star debut, hashtag idol charms. Woo! It's a mouthful, guys. You guys all know rookie group's gonna come out on After School Club, right?
Chat, laugh, dance along with your favorite idol groups. We got it all here. Let's go. Join us as we share all of this video on the live show. So thrilled. Be part of After School Club. You're watching After School Club. You're watching Arirang.
춥지 않은 처음 태어난 이별에서 사는 우리 손자유.
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Making news just for you. It's April 17th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yun, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Xiang.
Happy Monday, yeah.
Happy Monday. And Jessica Dainong. Happy Monday! I wanted to top that. I love this energy. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. And moving on, we're going to start with our news feed. A news feed which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. We start with a news item from Japan. Japanese police have arrested 24-year-old Ryuji Kimura, who allegedly threw a bomb towards Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Saturday. Kishida was visiting Sakazaki Port in Wakayama Prefecture to make a campaign speech for the upcoming by-election this month. Hundreds had gathered to hear him talk, but fortunately, no one was hurt from the explosion. And the attack comes less than a year since former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo was shot and killed during an election campaign last July. Moving on, Sunday marked the 9th anniversary of South Korea's biggest maritime disaster, the Seoul ferry sinking. Memorial services and events were held nationwide. Back on April 16, 2014, a ship carrying 476 passengers from Incheon to Jeju sank. A total of 304 passengers and crew members died. Among them, 254 were students and teachers from Danwon High School going on a field trip. And only a week has passed since Pae-seung-ah, a 9-year-old girl, was killed on the sidewalk of a school zone by a drunk driver. But we've still seen many accidents from drivers under the influence. Just on Saturday night, a driver in his late 20s was drunk to the point that his license had to be canceled. His car hit a ramp on one of the busiest expressways in Seoul, Gangbyeon Expressway, and flipped over. Fortunately, no one was injured, but the car blocked other car lanes, causing major traffic congestion. Now we're going to look a bit deeper into the third news item, DUI, driving under the influence. Now, after one elementary school student died and 3 were severely injured in broad daylight from a reckless drunk driver, demands for stricter penalties and regulation on DUI have been growing. And that's why police have laid out plans to strengthen random breath tests until the end of next month, regardless of the time of day or location. And last Friday, from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., police carried out 431 random breath tests. More than 1 out of the 10 drivers tested were over the alcohol limit during the short span time. And the public is also demanding that the penalties for drunk drivers should be strengthened. Now, a proposed legislation aims to reveal the name, age, and face of any driver who has driven under the influence at least 2 times in 10 years or killed someone through drunk driving. Taiwan has actually been doing this since last March. So here in the studio, Cheska, what do you think? Do any other countries have strong penalties against driving under the influence? And what do you think about the penalties Korea is slapping onto offenders currently?
It always causes so much sadness when I hear news about DUI, because Korea has been known to have very lenient penalties on DUI. So just to give you an example, if your BAC is over 0.03%, you get penalized depending on the severity.
Right.
Now in Korea, if you injure a person with a car, it's only 2 years of a license revoke. However, if you actually cause the death of a person, it is only 5 years. Now there have been a public outrage, as we saw in the news feed, and a demand for a more strict law, because assailants actually get away with very lenient penalties, and they actually cause multiple subsequent accidents afterwards. So I really think there should be a reconstruction on the law, and it demands a lot from the public as well.
I can't believe it's only 5 years for manslaughter.
And sometimes even you get even less than 5 years.
But you do get criminal charges on top of your license being revoked.
You do, but just the matter of the years is so low that people actually do have recurring accidents that happen.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's why a call for stricter laws have been demanded nationwide. In the United States, there's a so-called Bentley law, which requires drunk drivers who kill a parent to pay child support until the child is 18. And Tennessee was the first state to implement it, and related laws were passed in 20 other states. Here in Korea, lawmakers have proposed laws like this as well. Just last month, 3 similar ones were motioned in the National Assembly. So, Xiong, what do you think about this type of proposal? And as you mentioned, the penalties right now don't seem to be as grave compared to the consequences. So any other ideas you would like to give?
Yeah, I mean, like following some of the other examples other countries are doing, you do get things like a mandatory breath alcohol ignition interlock device, commonly called IID device or BAIID. You might have heard about it. So the driver who's a repeated offender driving under influence have to have a machine, a breathalyzer attached to his car, which you got to test yourself before the ignition comes on.
Oh, that's actually really
So it's quite a clever way to have a device that prevents any sort of drunk driving or, you know, driving under influence from the get-go. And I think countries like Australia, Belgium, Canada, Finland, France and the US are doing it already. There has been debate in Korea about enforcing these IIDs. But the problem is that the government thinks, I mean, all these other countries, the offenders pay for these machines. But in Korea, there's debate whether the government should pay for it or not, and which, in my opinion, is a bit, you know,
ludicrous,
slightly a bit ridiculous, to be honest. I think it should be the offenders who pay for these devices as well.
And I agree, we definitely need to see stronger regulation and penalties against drunk driving, especially since the most serious part of this issue is that it's not a one-time thing. Drivers caught are usually found to have driven under influence countless times. Now, moving on to today's discussion topic, we're going to be talking about health issues, specifically one that's causing concern among more people in their 20s and 30s. It's diabetes. Take a look at the screen to find out more.
Is there a zero sugar version of this? This is a common question millennials and Gen Z have been asking at restaurants and cafes before ordering a sweet drink. South Korea's leading beverage company, Lotte Chilsong, saw its sales of sugar-free soft drinks increase by 111% in 2022. Experts analyze this to be because more young people are concerned about their figure. But it's also because of health drawbacks like diabetes. The Korean Diabetes Association said the proportion of Koreans with diabetes has been picking up pace. Back in 2012, 1 out of 10 Koreans had it. But in 2020, this figure went up to 16.7%. What experts found more alarming was that 3 out of 10 people in their 30s had pre-diabetes, meaning their blood sugar level is higher than usual, but not to the point where it can be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Today, NewsGen aims to answer 3 questions. 1. How big of a health concern is diabetes to those in their 20s and 30s? 2. Why are we seeing more young people suffer from this health condition? 3. How are businesses trying to adapt to young people's growing awareness about their health? How big has the zero sugar market become here in Korea?
So let's talk health issues today. We're going to be talking about specifically what's concerning millennials and Gen Z in Korea. It's diabetes. So Xiong, walk us through just how much of a health concern diabetes is among Koreans in their 20s and 30s.
Yes, I mean, as many of us know, there are 2 types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is less common, the cause for which is often thought to be genetic or environmental factors, as it is a malfunction of your immune system. Type 2 is more common. It can also be hereditary, but being overweight, obese, or physically inactive are more defining factors. In Korea, diabetic patients have increased in number over the years, especially for the age group of 20s and 30s. Let's have a look at the data provided by the Korean National Health Insurance Service. For diabetics in their 20s, there has been a total of 57.2% increase between the period of 2017 to 2022, from around 24,000 to 38,000 patients. This is an annual increase of 12% during the 5-year period. For diabetics in their 30s, there's been a total of 25.7% increase between the period of 2017 to 2022, from 92,000 to 116,000 patients. This is an annual increase of 5.9% during the 5-year period as well. So there has been quite a bit of increase of diabetes patients in South Korea, especially in the younger generation.
Right, and I'm in my 20s myself, and I was quite alarmed to see that the annual increase for this period, for this generation, was 12%.
I just saw, yeah.
Only in the span of 5 years. That's quite alarming. Then why do you guys think that we're seeing more diabetics in their 20s and 30s? And do you guys have a sweet tooth?
I think you already answered the question yourself. Yeah. I definitely...
We all know.
You guys all know. I always carry packets of chocolate in my bag. And when you guys have low sugar, I'm the one that tossing chocolates.
Chalky time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Your breakfast is cakes and coffee.
Right.
Basically. Yeah.
That's the lethal combo. That's my go-to combination for energy spike.
Double icing.
Ooh.
Oh, really? That was a joke.
But I think in our generation, we definitely consider sweets as not only a self-reward, but also an entertainment. And Korea traditionally has never had like an overly sweetened food.
Right.
If you look at our sweet selection, it's very savory, not so much sweet. Yes. But I think there has been a growing influence of Western culture and this idea of sharing on social media these cafes, bakeries, and desserts that have really propelled, as we saw in the stats, younger generation to want to consume more sweets.
I can completely relate to what you said, self-rewarding. You know, after hard days of work, you just want to have a chocolate cake, upload it onto your Instagram and social media with a lot of...
You just want that little sweetness, right?
It gives you a kick of the day.
You a big fan of pretty desserts as well?
Yes, I'm a huge fan.
She's a huge fan.
I'm a huge fan of cute, sweet desserts. But what about you, Xion? Do you have a sweet tooth? And why do you think we're seeing more diabetics in their 20s and 30s?
Yeah, I mean, you know, just like as Cheska said, I think it's more of a recent phenomenon, Korean foods getting a bit sweeter. And traditionally, a lot of Korean foods were sweetened with fruits and, you know, like pears and apples and things like that, which is quite healthy for you. But you do see an increase of sugar intake and, you know, soft drinks are becoming more has been common as well.
That's right.
And, you know, I do enjoy sweetened foods, sweet foods, but not overly sweetened ones. And I hate when some of the Korean restaurants do a savory dish quite sweet. And like even some pastas are sweet, even some, you know, you get these sweet potatoes, pizzas.
I love them too.
I'm not so sure about those.
I'm not in this
Pizzas should be,
Your facial expression is priceless.
Paste or cheese. Anyways, but to be honest, I mean, sugar doesn't actually directly cause type 2 diabetes, as the British Diabetic Association mentioned, and you're more likely to get it if you're overweight. So, I mean, the Korean population is not particularly known to be obese, as you know. A lot of us are quite superficial society. Everybody wants to lose weight.
Right.
But it does have a considerable obese percentage at 36.3% in 2019.
Right.
So, I mean, lack of exercise, excessive food consumption and change of diet, I think, is what might have caused the rise in numbers of diabetics in their early 20s and 30s.
And it's actually one of the leading causes of deaths here in the country. And that's why a lot of Koreans find this to be a very serious and grave matter. Why do you think this is the case, though? Why are a lot of Koreans dying from this disease?
So based on what the experts have said, in recent years, stress, much like depression or everything that happens in our generation, have definitely caused a rise in diabetics, but also COVID because of increase in fast food delivery. There was so-called COVID-15, much like the freshman 15 pounds that you gained during COVID.
Right.
But on a more biological level, Koreans have a smaller pancreas compared to...
Do they?
Yeah, that are Westerners, which actually has weaker insulin secretion, which actually lowers the blood sugar. So that also promotes more increase in diabetics. However, 4 out of 10 adults have diabetes, but are not even aware of it at the moment because we're so young. We don't even, you know, have the idea to go to a hospital and get a checkup.
Yeah,
right,
you wouldn't think you'd have it.
I know, right?
You don't look like it.
Right, but I don't know how this connects, but a lot of people seem to be looking for zero sugar options too.
Absolutely.
It's not necessarily because they're too concerned about diabetes per se, but they know that too much sugar in your system isn't that good. So Cheska, why don't you explain to us how big this market has become?
Absolutely. I think it's the idea of you want to have the cake and eat it too. So they don't want to give up on the sugar, but they want the sweetness. So, I mean, I see aisles of zero-calorie drinks, cakes. Even I saw zero-calorie chocolate on an aisle once. I thought, Those two are oxymorons.
Did you try one of those?
I did, and it actually tasted pretty good because they're using substitutes.
Yeah, probably
So the market
stevia,
has definitely gotten bigger with different products, but do you have any stats to back this up?
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the screen to see how the zero market is growing. So in the 2020, the zero-calorie soft drink market had already reached about 101 million USD. And now in just 2 years, the market size has grown more than twice, reaching about 200 million USD. Now, this clearly reflects our generation's choice and keen interest in health and fitness. But as you can see, growing number of selections of food and consumption choices as well.
All right, and now we're going to take a listen from a health expert on how to better detect and prevent diabetes right after this. So we'll connect to you guys with a Skype interview right after this. We're now going to be hearing from a health expert on what type of signs or symptoms we should look for to identify diabetes. It's Dr. Yu Byung-wook, head of the International Clinic in Suncheongyang University Hospital here in Seoul. Great to have you here, Dr. Yu.
Good morning. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Dr. Yu.
All right. So, Dr. Yu, I'd like to ask you the first question. As we mentioned just now, more young people seem to be looking for zero sugar drinks or sugar substitutes because they're thinking about their diet or sometimes even the risk of diabetes. But does that mean it's okay for a pre-diabetic or people generally to have as much zero sugar drinks as they want?
Well, first of all, I'm so impressed. I'm watching the last 10 minutes of you guys conversing over it's like expertise debating about diabetes and pre-diabetes and the condition in Korea. You are concerned. Yes, I'm so impressed. But let me say, this kind of very sensible issues. Since we have this sweetener, zero sugar something, yes, a couple of years, but recently been increased. There are a lot of debate in not only Korea, also US. In Korea, until 2021, Korean KDCA, they say there are no problem. They mention it, no problem, zero sugar drinks. But it's been changed how zero sugar drink may affect badly for the people or general health. Because until now, unfortunately, there are no definite answer about whether zero something or not. Because these drinks contain no calories. That's why we believe it's good. But there are some reasons we have to concern. First, it may increase heart disease. Yes, some research they say, yes, this sweetener, sugar-free something will good for the diabetes and doesn't affect the sugar, but can be affect issue about heart disease. Second is, it can be developed with kidney disease. Also, we still debate it, but some reports is coming. Also, you can be surprised. This zero sugar drink, zero sugar something, may lead to the weight gaining. Surprise. Why? Because this sweetener can be interfering for microbiome, our gut, intestine interaction. So there are certain hormones can be increase your appetite. Finally, this zero sugar stuff may increase your weight. And also, this is still we are debating, may cause poor blood sugar controlling. Recently, we have a report, A1C showed us last 3 months average of your sugar. Yes, can be a little bit increased compared than just to free water. The last one is may concern about the woman who under the menopause condition. Yes, could increase your risk of osteoporosis. Wow. This is my little concern. Also, this is all of our medical expert. Until now, we still debate it because zero sugar company, they put their medical evidence. Also, our medical expert, we are looking for another condition in a couple of years later.
Right. So as you mentioned, Dr. Yu, though a lot of people think that zero sugar would be best for diabetes and for your health conditions, it might not be the case because it can heighten other health risks as well. And Xiong, I think you have a question for Dr. Yu as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I found it very interesting. I think stevia and things like that could be a healthier alternative to usual the saccharin and things like that. I think you've been mentioning from back in the days. But we'll have to see the conditions. But as I mentioned earlier, it's quite alarming to see more and more people in their 20s and their 30s being diagnosed with pre-diabetes and also type 2 diabetes. So what are some symptoms to look out for, and which symptoms would mean that you should go see a doctor?
Well, I don't want to make the shock to our dear viewers of the arena. You know what? Diabetes is silent assassin. No symptom actually from the beginning. Early 20s, 30s, even their sugar is fluctuating and over 100, and they are fasting sugar. But symptom is very mild and non-specific, so we couldn't recognize at all. Only the people who are very serious condition, the pancreas is damaged seriously because of the heavy drinkers, and the obese, central obese person, they might have thirsty and frequent pee, frequent urinations, and lose weight so fast in a short time. But this is classically they said, but actually early 20s, 30s, there are no definite symptoms. So under the Korean Health Insurance Services also expect in Korea Peninsula, why not to do the health screening at least once in a year? So simply 8 hours of fasting, we can simply catch your fasting sugar, we can tell. But another way, I already mentioned hemoglobin A1C is very useful too. You don't need to fast. You have a heavy meal last night, but no worry, because hemoglobin A1C shows us last 3 months or 4 months level of average of your sugar. We can tell your pre-diabetes or border of diabetes, or so far so good from the diabetes, or your diabetes.
So yeah, as I think Dr. Yu mentioned, I think testing frequently would be the best way to see if you have diabetes.
And you mentioned that too,
not.
Cheska, right?
Exactly.
And we're going to be mentioning this later with our viewers' comments, but it's such a big issue among millennials and Gen Z in other countries. So it was a great pleasure to be talking to you today, Dr. Yu.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So we're going to be moving on to include our global viewers in our talks. And as Dr. Yu just mentioned, because it's such a global issue, let's see how our viewers are reacting to this growing health crisis. Take a look at the screen. Blacksword3545 said, I think sugar consumption is a serious problem in South Korea. It's a big part of the tourism and the cultural enjoyment food element. All of it looks so good, tastes so good, but it ain't good for me, and it's not healthy to consume so much. Radicorn said, clearly I had sweet tooth when I was a kid because now I can eat sweet things, but my tolerance is too low. Diabetes and weight problems are a health issue in all ages. We need to take care of our body's health. And Mark said, I have developed a sweet tooth as I've gotten older. For Korea, it will be interesting to see how much access to so much Western food, including sweets, will affect Korean kids. Now, our viewers also mentioned that they are aware of diabetes and the growing sweet tooth among the younger generation. But before we wrap up our discussion, I would like to ask for you guys to share a few tips or facts on how to have a healthier diet and prevent developing diabetes in general.
Yeah, I mean, as we were mentioning before, in Korea as well, according to Statistics Korea, complications from diabetes is the 6th most common cause of death in South Korea as well. So I think there is an increase of being aware and things like that. One thing I could mention is the low glycemic index diet. You get your superfoods these days, things like whole grains, legumes, eating fruits and vegetables, and also keeping a regular exercise and things like that would be a good idea.
Definitely. And you, Cheska?
Actually, I would like to suggest something slightly similar but different from what Sean said. So we know about healthy lifestyle, workout, staying fit, but I would actually say that extreme dieting and this obsession with trying to stay too lean, going from starvation to binging, could actually cause a spike or disrupt the hormone levels, making your body more keen to becoming a diabetic. So I would actually think that maybe moderation and enjoying the delicacies in modicum probably adds more sweetness to our lives.
All right, moderation is key.
As we always say.
As we always say, moderation is key. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you topics that young people are
are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiang
My pleasure, Ian.
and Cheska Dainhong.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.
번 이후엔